Now today I want to talk about an expert advisor that will simply close all of your trades at a scheduled time. So the use case for this might be that you know the market closes at around midnight and that it's closed for a couple of minutes and that there can then be a gap. So perhaps you just want to close all of your trades just before that happens. So this expert advisor will simply close every trade you have. I will show you how you can add some conditions if you want to limit that to certain types of trades, but I won't go into every possible condition. I'm really just showing you where you can add those kind of conditions. I'm making a separate video for MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. Now this is the MetaTrader 4 video, but a lot of the code is going to be similar or the same between MetaTrader 4 and 5. But rather than confuse you by switching between the two, I'm making separate videos. So now let's go straight into the editor and I'll write the code for an expert advisor that runs independently of everything else and closes all of your trades at a given time of day. Now this is the MetaTrader 4 editor open, and I have here my experts folder, and inside that I've already got a folder called Orchard. I'm going to create another folder inside that called Close on Schedule. And then I'm going to create my expert inside this Close on Schedule folder. And that's created the outline of the expert for me. I can now close the navigator because I won't need that again, just to give myself a little bit more space on screen. Now I'm actually going to start by writing the function to close the trades first, because that's a fairly standard loop through all of the existing trades and just close them. So down here at the end of the code, I'll insert a few blank lines. Now, as I said, I'm writing this to close all trades that you have, all symbols, all magic numbers, everything. But if you wanted to limit this to certain symbols, maybe the current chart symbol or certain magic numbers because you're only running for certain expert advisors, or magic number 0 if you only want manual trades, then you could change this to close all and pass in whatever arguments you like. And I'll show in the code then how you can run the tests for this. But at the moment, close all takes no arguments because it's going to close every trade. Now I'm starting with this success variable, bool success equals true, because this close all function is a boolean. I should have had that in the comments as well. That should also be boolean. I'm going to return if I've been successful in closing all trades. And so success I'm initially setting to true. And you'll see that I update that as we go through and attempt to close trades. And here's the standard loop that I would use for int I equals orders total minus 1. So I'm beginning with the last order, while I is greater than or equal to 0 and I minus minus. And that's the way I generally write these loops. The first thing to do is to select each order based on this index I. What I'm saying here, if not order select index I, select by position mode trades, that means that for some reason orders total has an index to an order which I was unable to select. Now that doesn't happen very often. It could be simply that when I picked up the orders total in the brief moment of time until I get to this next statement, one of those orders has closed. And so I come to the order select, try to select by position mode trades, and the order is already gone. In that case, I just set success to false, and it will stay false then through the rest of the code, and you'll see how I make that happen. And then continue, which will simply loop back to the next iteration of this loop. And here again, reminding you that this is closing all trades, but if you want to add additional conditions, I'll just put some commented type conditions in here so you can see what I would do. So if you only wanted to test for certain symbols, you would have this if order symbol is not equal to symbol, and that symbol would match the argument that you've passed in here. And the same for a magic number, magic. If you wanted to close by certain types of trades and so on, you could put those conditions in here as long as you've managed to pass the argument in to this optional close all function. As I'm writing this, I'm going to be closing both the open trades and any pending orders, but you can easily remove part of this if you only want to close the open trades or just the pending orders. So my first test here, if order type equals order type by or order type equals order type sell. So that means that these are existing trades and not pending orders. And in that case, I use the order close function and just pass in order ticket. I want to close all of the lots, so order lots tells me how many total lots there are in that order, and order close price will give me the current closing price for that order, and 0 for slippage. This returns a boolean if I've been successful or not, and that boolean then I've got success ampersand equals. So if success is already false, it will stay false. If success is true, then it will be true if this is true and false if this is false. And so that's how I set success, and it will only ever switch from true where it's initialized to false if one of these statements fails. If the order is not a type by or a type sell, then it must be a pending order, and then I have to use order delete just with the order ticket number. And again, success ampersand equals order delete. So at the end of this, all I need to do now is close out this loop and then just return that success. And that's the end of that function. So by returning success here, in the rest of my code, I can detect whether I've successfully closed all orders, and I can take some kind of action on that. And I'll show the action that I'm going to take then as I go into the rest of the code. So that's the end of the CloseAll. Now let's go back and write the rest of the code. And the rest of this code is identical for MetaTrader 4 and 5. So if you've seen the other video, then you may get a sense of deja vu as you watch this code. I'm actually in the MetaTrader 4 editor, but as I said, this code is identical for MetaTrader 4 and 5, and to save myself some time, I'm just recording it once. I've added some blank lines of spacing above and below, just so that you don't get distracted by the things that are different. Ignore the line numbers then, because these will change, but this code that I'm going to write between this next is the same for 4 and 5, and above here is the same for 4 and 5. This is exactly the same. I've also done a small amount of reformatting, but I still have the main functions that were created by the wizard here: on init, on dinit, and on tick. So let's start with the obvious thing. I need some inputs because I need to know the hour and minute when you want to close these trades. I'm capturing these as an hour and a minute, so input int close hour and close minute, and I'm defaulting this at the moment to 23:55 because I'm assuming the most common use case is that you want to close just before the end of the day. I'm going to create a global variable which is the next close time, and I'm going to be using that in the rest of the tests to know when I should be closing trades. And that's all I need in the inputs and the global variables. I now move to on init, where I'm going to do some input validation and actually set up that next close time. But just a little warning, if I've set this to 23:55, if your broker happens to close down at 23:50 and you set this close time at 23:55 and the market is closed, then this expert simply is not able to close those trades. I'm just leaving that up to you to make sure that when you run this, you set the close hour and close minute to times when the market is actually open. Now I'm just going to add some tests to verify that the close hour and close minute that you've entered here are valid. I know I've got valid default values, but you can easily change these on the input screen. So the tests are: if the close hour is less than 0 or the close hour is greater than 23, that's an invalid time. Print format, invalid close hour, use the range 0 to 23, and I show the close hour in this placeholder. And then I simply return init parameters incorrect. I do the same for minute, but obviously here the range is from 0 to 59, and so I print a slightly different message and put in the close minute. And then I'm going to calculate what this next close time is, and I'm just going to do that with a function because I'll be using it in several places. So I'm calling my function set next close time, and I'll go down to the bottom of the code and add that function now. Now in this set next close time, I'm going to actually calculate what the next close time is, and I'm going to be comparing that to the current time. And what I'm going to be saying is that if the current time is after the next close time, then I'm already past that next close time and I'm simply going to move to the next day. It's a little bit of an assumption because if you happen to run this, as I said, the defaults here are 23:55. If you started this at 23:55 and 1 second, then it's going to simply move that next close time to the next day. Now I could have compressed this into less lines, but I thought it was easier to read this way. Firstly, next close time equals I time symbol, that's the chart symbol, period D1, 0. So it doesn't really matter what the symbol is, because period D1 is going to give me the start time for today for this symbol. I suppose if you've got a symbol that doesn't run at weekends and you start this on a Saturday, then yes, it might make a difference for the symbol, but in most cases that's not going to be an issue. So that gives me just the start time for today, but I haven't taken into account the actual close hour and close minute that were specified. So next close time plus equals close hour multiplied by 3600, because I'm converting that to seconds, plus close minute multiplied by 60. So that adds the specified time onto the beginning of the day, and now close time, or next close time, is the hour and minute of today. And then, as I said, if time current, so if we start this up with a set time of 23:55, but the current time is actually 23:57, then time current is greater than next close time, and then I simply say next close time plus equals 86,400, which is 1 day. So I just move next close time to the next day. So after set next close time, I have a value in this global variable of next close time, which is 23:55 on either today or the next day if the current time is already after 23:55. And then back in the on init, I have return init succeeded. Now there's one more thing that I need to do in this set next close time. So I've calculated the next close time, but also I don't want to run this function on tick. I don't want to check the time on tick, because it's entirely possible that a tick doesn't happen in that last minute or 2 minutes of the day. I'm actually going to be using the on timer. And to use that, I need to actually set a timer. So if I go back down to this set next close time, I'm going to call a function here, which I'm going to call set timer, and now I'll just write that function. So I've written a comment here as well, don't rely on tick. I'm going to rely on the timer. And also be careful, I'm assuming in this expert advisor that the timer is not being used for anything else. If you incorporate this code into another expert advisor and you happen to also be using the timer for something else, then you don't want to be resetting the values like this, because it will upset the other timer that you've got running. Now, this is a complete standalone expert advisor, and in a few minutes when I get to the end, I'll show what you need to do to incorporate this if you want to into your own expert advisor. But for now, I'm assuming this runs on its own, and so I don't need to worry about anything else using this timer. And the command to set the timer, event set timer, and that takes a number of seconds between times that the timer will fire. And the value I'm passing there, it's an integer, so I'm casting to an int because I'm using mathmax, and mathmax returns a double, so I'm casting that to an integer. It's the maximum of next close time minus time current minus 60. So if the next close time is 23:55 and the time now is midday, then I don't want to be firing the timer constantly. This will simply say I'm going to allow enough seconds between next close time and now, and just 60 seconds before that, just in case. So it's the maximum of that or 30 seconds. So if next close time happens to be within 60 seconds, then I'll set that to 30 seconds. So that takes care of setting the timer, and this will simply sit there then and wait until I'm only 60 seconds away from time current. And you'll see how I handle that when we get to actually writing the code in the on timer. But that's the set timer function, and it's called here when I set the next close time. So that finishes the on init, and I've got the return init succeeded here. Because I have a timer set, I need to remove that when the expert exits. And that's just event kill timer in on deinit. I said I'm not doing anything in on tick. So now I'll go to on timer. Now the first thing I want to handle in on timer is making sure that we've actually reached that close time. So if next close time is greater than time current, then we haven't reached it yet. Now remember, when I call the set timer, I'm actually setting the timer so it will fire 60 seconds before the close time. So we've come in 60 seconds before, and then I call set timer again. And now, because we're within that 60 seconds, the set timer function will, using that math max, return 30 seconds. So when you think what might happen here, time current, it's going to fire 60 seconds before, then 30 seconds after that, and then 30 seconds after that, which should bring us to time current. Now, allowing for a little bit of processing slip, maybe we're 1 or 2 seconds after time current. But that way, the timer only fires just before the current time, and then a couple of times after that, and then suddenly we're in the correct processing time. So calling the set timer will take care of simply moving that timer jump until it gets close enough to time current, and then just return. Now, one of the advantages of using on timer, if your expert is running, this should fire even when the market is closed. You won't be able to perform any trading, but it will at least fire and go through the rest of the steps. But I'm going to put some code in here to guard just in case that didn't happen. If there's some reason why it didn't happen and you've maybe skipped a day because it's a weekend. I don't expect this to happen, I'm just being careful. And so you might consider this to be optional, but I'm saying here, if time current minus next close time is greater than 300, so that's 5 minutes. So if the current time is 5 minutes after the close time, then I'm going to assume that the close time has come and gone, and for some reason this didn't fire, and I'm not going to simply close all the trades now because it's too late and something else may have happened. So I'm just going to skip this and then move up the time. And I'm doing that with the set next close time, that same function we had before, which will move this next close time up to the next time of day after now, and then return. And if I get to this point, then I know that the current time is greater than or equal to the next close time, and it's not greater than by more than 5 minutes. So this is the time where I want to close the trades. And I'm going to try this 5 times. Remember that the CloseAll function we wrote is a Boolean, so that will return a false if anything happens that means that a trade can't close. And I'm simply going to retry that, but I'm not going to retry it infinitely. I'm going to try 5 times, and I'm doing that with a for statement. For int I equals 4, while I is greater than or equal to 0, so that's 5, and not CloseAll. So we'll call this CloseAll function. If that returns true, then this obviously is false, and so it will exit the for statement. And that will simply call that CloseAll up to 5 times while it's failing. If it gets to 5 times and CloseAll has still been unsuccessful, you might want to put in some error statements, or maybe inside the CloseAll function you want to add some error statements that I didn't have. But that will take care of attempting to close all trades, and only at this next close time of the day. And here in this CloseAll, if this is being done just for the current chart symbol or something, then you would obviously use the variation to CloseAll where you set conditions and you'd put the values for those conditions into this argument. And that's all the code. And as I said, this part of the code is common to MetaTrader 4 and 5. This is a standalone expert advisor. If you wanted to incorporate this into an existing expert advisor and just close the trades for that expert, you would still need these inputs, close hour and close minute, unless you wanted to hard code those. I would put the same conditions in here, so you include these input statements in your expert. You would still have a next close time global variable. You would put these condition statements into onInit to verify that the close hour and close minute are valid. And you would still have a set next close time, so all of that goes in onInit along with any other code that you already have there for your expert advisor. You would still have an event kill timer in onDinit. OnTick would have whatever code you have for your expert advisor. And then in the onTimer, assuming you're only using the onTimer for this daily close, then you would have all of this code in the onTimer. And of course you would have the next close time and the set timer. And remember, if you're using the timer for something else, you'll just have to adjust this so that you don't update the timer. You just have it set to a small enough unit so that it's going to make sure that it runs at the right time of day. So you just copy these functions into your Expert Advisor, and that will put all of this into an existing Expert Advisor for you. But this particular expert is written to run standalone. I want to show one variation, and the code here is also applicable to both MetaTrader 4 and 5, so the code is the same. So I'm still going to be showing just in the MetaTrader 4 editor. And that is the case where you maybe want to run this once a week. So let's say you want to run and close all trades at the end of the week, so you avoid the possibility of gapping during the weekend. So first I need one additional input, and that's the input close day of week. MetaTrader stores days of week where Sunday is 0, so Friday is 5. I'm going to add validation for that day of week, the same that I have here for the hour and the minute. But here I'm saying day of week must be between 0 and 6. I'm not going to make any changes to set timer, so I'm not going to try to set next close time to be that particular close time for the week. Instead, I'm going to handle it in on timer, which means I'm going to let this fire on a daily basis, but I'm going to exit if this is not the right day of the week. So this particular condition is still the first thing. If next close time is less than the current time, then I haven't reached that trigger time for the day yet. Call the set timer and return. And set timer, remember, it's still just setting the time for the day. I haven't included any day of week in the set timer function. I'm declaring this DT variable, which is an MQL date time structure. This is an inbuilt structure type. And then I'm using the time to struct function to convert next close time into that DT. And at the end of that statement, DT will contain the time broken down into the component pieces like seconds, hours, days, and so on. Note, I'm not using time current. So I am using the next close time. I want to know the day of the week of the next close time, not the day of the week of the current time. And that's because if you're setting times that are very close to midnight, it's possible that due to a slight slippage in time, time current might actually be the next day. So if you're trying to set this to something like 23:59, time current might have slipped into the next day. But once I have that date and time broken down into a date time structure, I can then simply check to see if the day of the week matches. So if dt.day of week is not equal to the close day of the week, then set next close time, we'll simply move next close time to the next day and return. And that's all I need. That will prevent this or the rest of this code from running except on this given day of the week. And that finishes all of the code that is common between MetaTrader 4 and 5. The only differences are in the beginning of this code and the CloseAll function. I hope this has been useful. If it has, click the like, click the subscribe, and until next time, thank you for watching.